My beloved friends, let us begin by settling into a great simplicity, a simplicity so profound that the human mind rushes past it and never sees it at all. For centuries, mankind has lived under a fundamental misunderstanding about spiritual power. The world has believed that spiritual power is something to seek, something to acquire, something to summon from a distant God who may or may not hear our call, may or may not come to our rescue. And because of this misunderstanding, humanity has built its entire spiritual life upon effort, upon petition, upon fear, upon striving. But spiritual power is never found through effort. It is never gained by pleading. It is never awakened by emotion, nor by the pressure of human will. Spiritual power is the presence itself, and the presence is the nature of your being. We have been taught to believe that there is a God somewhere, separate from us, who must be reached, persuaded, or convinced. And in that belief, we have created an inner division so deep that we no longer know who we are. We pray to a God afar off because we imagine ourselves to be creatures apart. But we are not apart. We have never been apart. The separation exists only in belief, never in truth. The great misunderstanding of our age and of all ages past is this: we have mistaken the mind for the self, and we have mistaken thought for truth. The mind is a wonderful instrument, but it is not the source of life. It is not the source of peace. It is not the source of revelation. The mind can analyze, it can calculate, it can remember, but it cannot give you truth. Truth does not arise from thought. Truth reveals itself when thought is silent. And because humanity has believed that thought is power, the world has filled itself with prayers that are nothing more than mental noise, prayers that beg, that hope, that fear, that demand. Yet the presence does not enter through noise. It does not break through the turbulence of a mind struggling to secure its own safety. The presence comes only when the mind relinquishes its imagined authority and becomes still. You see, the spiritual life does not begin when we add something to ourselves. The spiritual life begins when we subtract what never belonged to us, the belief that we live separate from the infinite, that we must protect ourselves, that we must defend a personal identity. And the moment we release that belief, even for a breath, a silence opens, and through that silence, the presence announces itself. Let me say this with all the clarity of truth. Spiritual power is not something you acquire. Spiritual power is what you are when the mind is lifted off of itself. There is a longing in every human heart, a longing that no success, no possession, no relationship can ever satisfy. That longing is not for something outside ourselves. It is the longing to awaken from the dream of separation, the longing to know ourselves as we are known in God. And until that longing is met, the mind will wander endlessly, seeking answers in thought, solutions in effort, peace in circumstances. But the moment the mind grows quiet, truly quiet, you discover that the one you are seeking is the one who is aware of the seeking. This is why Jesus said, "I can of my own self do nothing." And yet in the same breath he revealed, "I am the truth. I am the life." He pointed away from personal will and pointed toward presence. He pointed away from human effort and pointed toward divine identity. And Joel Goldsmith, in perfect alignment with this eternal teaching, reminds us that the I which I am is not the personal self, not the thinking mind, but the infinite, invisible, appearing as individual being. When you understand this, when you begin to sense, even faintly, that spiritual power is not something that comes to you, but something that flows through you as your very being, you will cease all spiritual struggle. You will stop trying to reach God and begin resting in the realization that the presence has been your life since before you were born into form. Therefore, let us begin our journey here, in the simplicity of silence, in the recognition that we are not going to discover God through thought, nor through effort, nor through technique. We are going to discover God where God has always been, in the deep stillness of the eye that is aware of this very moment. Let us pause, not to think, not to affirm, not to seek, but to recognize. Right here, right now, the presence is. Right here, right now, the I am is the life of your being. Right here, without moving an inch, you are home. This is the end of the great misunderstanding. Spiritual power is not something you reach for. It is the nature of the one who is already here. My friends, now that we have laid aside the belief that spiritual power must be acquired, we may turn to the heart of the matter, the nature of the I that you are. For until this is understood, all spiritual practice remains a struggle, all meditation remains an effort, and all prayer becomes a seeking after what is already present. There comes a moment in the life of every seeker, one decisive moment, when they begin to question the one who is doing the seeking. They ask, "Who am I?" Not as a philosophical curiosity, not as an intellectual exercise, but because something in them senses that the answer to this question changes everything. The world has conditioned us to believe that the I is the personality, the body we inhabit, the thoughts we think, the emotions we feel, the story we tell about ourselves. But this I has never been stable. It changes. It wavers. It fears. It desires. It clings. It ages. It suffers. And so long as we believe this unstable sense of self to be the truth of our being, our entire spiritual life becomes an attempt to repair it, protect it, improve it, or glorify it. Yet listen closely. The personal I is never the true I. It is only a mental image, a temporary mask worn by the infinite. When Moses asked for the name of God, the answer was not a doctrine, not a creed, not a theological argument. The answer was two words so simple that the intellect cannot grasp their majesty. I am. This was not the declaration of a distant deity. It was the unveiling of the nature of being itself. I am does not describe a person. I am does not describe a condition. I am does not describe a body or a history. I am is the eternal presence announcing itself as existence. And this, beloved friends, is where the spiritual journey begins. Not when you repeat the words I am, but when you realize that the one who silently witnesses your thoughts, your emotions, your body, your life, that one is the I am, not the thinker of thoughts, not the one who worries, not the one who fears, but the awareness in which all of these thoughts and emotions appear. This is why Joel Goldsmith said, "The I of you is God," not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally, in truth. You see, every time you say, "I am sick," you have unknowingly attached the infinite name to a passing appearance. You have clothed the eternal in the garment of the temporary. You have identified the changeless self with a changing condition. And the moment you do this, the mind and the body respond accordingly because they obey the identity you declare. But the I that you truly are has never been touched by sickness. It has never been injured, never been impoverished, never been afraid. The infinite cannot suffer the limitations of the finite. Only the belief in a separate personal self can do that. When Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life, he was not speaking of a human personality. He was speaking from the identity of the Christ, the universal I am presence, that is the life of every individual. He was saying, I am the truth of your being as much as mine. I am the life that animates all creation. I am the light that cannot be overcome. Do you see? When you understand the nature of the I am, you understand why spiritual transformation is not a matter of thinking differently, but of being differently. You understand why no ritual, no practice, no affirmation can give you what you already are. You understand why, the moment you rest in the true I, fear dissolves, lack dissolves, the sense of separation dissolves, because the false identity can no longer sustain itself in the presence of truth. And so, my friends, the spiritual path is not the path of becoming. It is the path of recognizing what? Recognizing that the I, which is aware of this very moment, is not the mind, not the body, not the personality. It is the infinite I am, expressing as individual consciousness. Let us pause again, not to think, but to recognize. Right now, the I that sees, the I that hears, the I that knows that I is the presence. It is unchanged by your past. It is unaffected by your circumstances. It is unafraid of your future. It is eternal, complete, and whole. And when you rest in that, even for a moment, you no longer live as a separate being trying to reach God. You live as the presence revealing itself through you, as you, in every breath. This, beloved friends, is the beginning of Christ consciousness, not a mystical experience reserved for the few, but the recognition of the true identity of everyone. My dear friends, now that we have touched the sacred realization that the true I is the infinite presence and not the personal self, we may look calmly and clearly at the mechanism by which suffering arises. For suffering does not come from life. It does not come from God. It does not come from the presence that is your being. Suffering comes from one place only, the belief in a separate self and the activity of the mind that serves that belief. Let us speak plainly. The mind, as it functions in the world, is not your enemy, but it is ignorant. It is not malicious, but it is mistaken. It interprets life through the lens of separation. It believes it is a self living inside a body, subject to chance, danger, uncertainty, mortality. And because the mind believes this, it must remain in a constant state of tension, vigilance, and defense. The mystics have known this for thousands of years, and now, at last, even modern science confirms it. Neuroscience tells us that there is a network in the brain whose purpose is to maintain the illusion of a separate me, a self, to be protected, improved, justified, defended. Science calls this the default mode network. The mystic calls it the ego. Different words, same illusion. This network becomes active whenever you think about the past, the future, your self-image, your fears, your desires, your judgments, your stories. It creates a sense of identity made entirely of thought, a fragile identity that can be wounded by a look, threatened by a circumstance, or shattered by a change in conditions. This is why the mind suffers. It is trying to preserve something that does not exist. The moment the mind believes, this body is me, it must fear for its survival. The moment it believes, my security depends on the world, it must cling to the world. The moment it believes, my worth comes from others, it must fear rejection. The moment it believes, my life is separate from God, it must beg for what it already is. But listen carefully. The suffering does not arise from the events of life. It arises from the interpretation of life by the personal mind. The body does not create fear. Circumstances do not create fear. Thought creates fear because thought has accepted a false identity. And so Jesus, with the clarity of the Christ, said, take no thought, not because thought is bad, but because thought cannot know truth. Thought belongs to the personal sense of self, and the personal sense of self is illusion. Joel Goldsmith expressed the same truth when he said, all error is impersonal, meaning the fear you feel does not belong to your true being. The anxiety you experience does not belong to the I am. The suffering that rises and falls within you is not yours. It is the echo of a mind defending an identity that God never created. Now listen to how science and spirit converge. When the mind becomes quiet, even momentarily, the default mode network reduces its activity. The sense of a separate self loosens. The brain becomes more coherent, more unified. The individual begins to feel connected, peaceful, spacious. The mystic calls this the dissolution of ego. Science calls it decreased self-referential processing. The result is the same. The false identity loses its grip, and the presence is felt. But notice something subtle. The presence was not created by the stillness. The presence was merely revealed when the mind ceased its self-centered activity. You have not become spiritual. You have remembered what you always were. That is why Joel Goldsmith insisted again and again that spiritual healing is not the changing of conditions, but the dissolving of the belief in a personal self, the one who thinks, fears, reacts, resists, and suffers. And when that false I is recognized as illusion, the suffering attached to it dissolves of itself. You may ask, but how does this help me in daily life? How does this relieve my fear, my stress, my pain? And the answer is simple, though not easy. The moment you stop identifying with the personal thought stream, the moment you recognize, this is not I, this is only the mind, suffering loses its anchor. Fear cannot survive when you stop calling it my fear. Pain cannot become identity when you stop saying I am in pain. Lack cannot imprison you when you stop declaring I am poor. Stress cannot dominate you when you realize this is not I. This is the mind performing its habitual dance. In that recognition, even in the smallest glimpse, you are free. You do not make yourself free. You behold the truth that has always been true. This is why both the mystic and the neuroscientist agree that silence, stillness, and present awareness transform human experience. But the mystic alone explains why. Because the stillness removes the mask of the personal self and reveals the I am. And when the I am is known, suffering has no foundation left upon which to stand. My beloved friends, now that we have seen how the personal mind creates suffering through the sense of separation, let us turn to the remedy, not a human remedy, not a technique of the intellect, but the way revealed by the mystics in every age and brought into our time with extraordinary clarity by Joel Goldsmith. This way is called practicing the presence. To those unfamiliar with the mystical path, this phrase may sound like meditation, affirmation, concentration, or the use of thought to reach God, but practicing the presence is none of these. It is not thinking about God. It is not speaking to God. It is not visualizing God. It is not attempting to bring God nearer. Practicing the presence is the art of becoming still enough, receptive enough that the truth which is already present may reveal itself. It is the shift from attempting to bring God into your life to recognizing that God is the life you are living. You see, the infinite cannot be brought to you because it is already where you are. The presence does not enter your experience. It is your experience. But the noise of the personal mind covers this truth like clouds obscuring the sun. And so the work is not to reach the sun, for it is always shining, but to let the clouds drift away. This is why Joel taught the pause, that holy instant when you step out of the mental stream and allow the truth to speak in its own voice. It goes like this. You stop. You become quiet. You withdraw your attention from the problem, from the thought, from the emotion. You do not resist it. You simply stop identifying with it. You become attentive not to a thought, not to a mantra, but to the inner stillness in which the presence dwells. This stopping, this simple pause, begins a transformation in the brain. For in that moment, the mind is no longer feeding the illusion of a separate self. The survival centers quiet down. The stress circuits begin to release. The default mode network, the machinery of ego, reduces its activity. And in that brief stillness, a new possibility emerges. The experience of the I that is not the mind. Joel Goldsmith taught that truth is never revealed through noise. It is not revealed through the pressure of spiritual ambition, nor through the intensity of human desire. It is revealed when the mind becomes still enough to hear the still small voice, the voice that speaks without sound and heals without effort. Practicing the presence is therefore not doing anything. It is undoing, unclenching, relaxing into the truth that is already present. Let me say this plainly. In the silence, God reveals God as your very being. When you enter that silence, even for a moment, you are no longer living from the personal mind. You are living from the presence. And everything the presence touches becomes aligned with harmony. The body responds. The emotions calm. The nervous system shifts from contraction to openness. The brain reorganizes itself around peace rather than fear. But this is not because silence has magical properties. It is because silence removes the interference of the personal self. Practicing the presence does not change God. It does not bring God to you. It does not persuade God to act. Practicing the presence changes you, or rather, it removes the one who never was you and allows the true I to shine forth. In this stillness, you discover that God is not a power to be invoked. God is not a force you must summon. God is not an external source you must reach. God is the I that you are. And the moment you feel even a glimmer of this truth, you realize why Joel Goldsmith insisted that spiritual healing is effortless, not because the body or the world changes, but because the one who identified with fear has dissolved. The presence does the work. The presence reveals the truth. The presence transforms the consciousness. And the brain, that extraordinary instrument, follows the lead of consciousness. It becomes calm because the true I is calm. It becomes coherent because the true I is one. It becomes harmonious because the true I is harmony itself. And so, beloved friends, practicing the presence is the single most direct way to bring the brain into alignment with its purpose, not to defend a personal identity, but to express the infinite. Practicing the presence is not an act. It is an attitude, not a ritual, but a resting, not a technique, but a surrender into the truth that is already here. It is the willingness to be still and know, not to think that, not to convince yourself that, but to know. And in that knowing, life becomes simple. Effort ceases. Striving dissolves. Fear loses its foundation, and the presence takes its rightful place at the center of your being. My beloved friends, now that we have touched the sacred practice of resting in the presence, let us turn our attention to what happens within the body, particularly the brain, when the I am becomes your lived identity rather than a phrase on your lips. You see, the brain is not the source of consciousness. It is the instrument through which consciousness is expressed in the world of form. It is the vessel, the servant, the reflector. And so when the sense of identity changes, the brain must follow. It has no choice. It is obedient to the consciousness that uses it. When you live as the personal self, the brain is constantly organizing itself around fear, protection, memory, reaction, and survival. It must do this because the personal self is always threatened by loss, threatened by time, threatened by uncertainty, threatened by the very nature of existence in a changing world. But when you begin to rest in the true I, the I am that is whole, eternal, and untouched, the brain begins to interpret life differently. It reorganizes around peace, not fear, around openness, not vigilance, around unity, not separation. Modern science calls this neural integration, coherence, gamma synchronization, and many other terms. But the mystic sees it more clearly. The brain is quieting because the false identity is no longer running the show. Consider this. When the personal sense of self is dominant, the brain's default mode network, the portion that creates the story of me, is active, noisy, self-referential. It analyzes, compares, judges, fears, anticipates, clings, resists. But when the I am is recognized, the story collapses. The mind becomes simple. The attention rests. The sense of separation dissolves. And in that dissolution, the brain receives a new instruction from the depths of being. There is no danger here. All is well. This is not positive thinking. This is presence recognizing itself. And the brain responds by calming the survival centers, softening the emotional reactivity, increasing connectivity between regions, once divided, creating a sense of wholeness that is not produced but revealed. Those who study the brain may say that meditation increases alpha waves or that spiritual contemplation produces gamma coherence. But understand this, beloved friends. The brain is not creating the experience of presence. The brain is responding to the recognition of presence. Let us put this in the language of Joel Goldsmith. When you know yourself as the I am, the body and mind conform to that knowing. When you forget who you are, they conform to the belief in separation. This is why some people feel a profound peace arise during meditation, not because meditation has magical properties, but because for a moment, the personal self has been set aside. It is why others experience clarity, intuition, or a sense of oneness, not because a technique has produced it, but because the mind has become quiet enough to let the presence shine through. And what of the heart? What of the emotions? As the brain reorganizes around the I am, emotions that once seemed overwhelming gradually lose their grip. Fear becomes less convincing. Anger dissolves more quickly. Anxiety finds no foundation. Why? Because emotions are the children of belief, and when the belief in separation is dissolved, the children lose their fuel. But the most remarkable change, my friends, is this. A sense of inner lightness arises, a peace that does not depend on what is happening in the world, a stillness that is alive, intelligent, and self-sustaining. This is not the calm of a relaxed body. It is the calm of a realized identity. This is not the peace of a quiet room. It is the peace of a quiet mind. This is not the joy of a pleasant circumstance. It is the joy of the presence, knowing itself. In this state, the state of Christ consciousness, the brain becomes an instrument of clarity rather than confusion, of intuition rather than fear, of compassion rather than self-defense. One begins to see with new eyes. One begins to hear beneath the surface of words. One begins to sense the underlying harmony that is always present, even when the outward appearance is one of chaos. This is why Joel Goldsmith often said that healing does not happen through thought, but through consciousness. When the I am is realized, the brain and thus the body reorganizes around the truth of wholeness, not because we tried to make it so, but because we stopped identifying with the self that believed itself broken. And so I say to you, the moment you cease living as the personal self and begin resting in the I am, the entire machinery of your being shifts from survival to harmony. The brain becomes peaceful. The emotions become spacious. The body becomes receptive. And the life becomes aligned with the rhythm of the infinite. This, beloved friends, is the brain on Christ consciousness, not a mystical fantasy, not a theological abstraction, but the natural consequence of living from your true identity rather than from the illusion of separateness. My beloved friends, now that we have seen how the brain responds to the awareness of I am, let us look directly at the great turning point on the spiritual path, the moment when one moves from effort to effortless being, from striving to allowing, from the weary labor of the personal self to the quiet grace of the presence. For most of us, the spiritual journey begins with effort. We try to change our thoughts. We try to have faith. We try to still the mind. We try to trust God. We try to overcome fear. And though the intention may be sincere, the one who is trying is still the personal self, and the personal self has no capacity to unite with the infinite. And so long as you try to reach God, you are affirming that God is absent. So long as you try to become spiritual, you are affirming that spirituality is not your nature. So long as you try to improve the self, you are affirming that the self is lacking. But listen now, with the ears of the heart. All personal effort is resistance disguised as progress. Effort is the declaration that I, as a separate being, will accomplish something. Yet the moment you declare separation, the moment you affirm the personal self, you lose contact with the source. Joel Goldsmith expressed this truth with irresistible clarity when he said, I can of my own self do nothing. God is the only presence, the only power, the only activity. The spiritual path does not begin with more effort. It begins when the futility of effort is seen. It begins when you stop trying to lift yourself and allow the presence to carry you. This is the great shift, the shift from doership to surrender, from forcing to receptivity, from attempting to produce spiritual results to allowing the infinite to reveal itself. Understand this deeply. Trying belongs to the personal mind. Allowing belongs to the presence. Trying tightens the body. Allowing relaxes it. Trying agitates the mind. Allowing stills it. Trying shuts the door of consciousness. Allowing opens it. When we struggle, we are announcing that we believe in two powers, a condition that threatens us and a God who might or might not intervene. But when we allow, we are acknowledging that there is only one presence, and it is here. There is only one power, and it is acting now. There is only one life, and it is your being. The moment you cease trying to fix the condition, you stop feeding the belief in its power. The moment you cease trying to heal the body, you stop declaring that the body has authority over you. The moment you cease trying to solve the problem, you stop affirming that the problem exists in reality rather than appearance. This does not mean indifference. It means recognition. Recognition that the I am, not the personal self, is the one living your life. This is why Joel often instructed his students to pause in the face of fear, lack, or pain, and simply ask, who is the I that is experiencing this? Not to find an answer in words, but to withdraw identification from the false sense of self that suffers. In that pause, you feel a loosening, a softening, a surrender. You let go of the belief that you must manage, control, or direct life. You allow the natural intelligence of the presence to carry the moment. And do you know what happens when you make this shift? The body relaxes, the breath deepens, the mind quiets, the heart opens, and the brain rewires itself not because you forced it to, but because its master has changed. You are no longer living from the mind. You are living from the presence behind the mind. This is why miracles appear effortless. This is why healing happens without struggle. This is why supply comes without strain. This is why clarity arises without thought. They do not come because you finally tried hard enough. They come because you finally stopped trying. You surrendered the personal identity that could not receive them and allowed the infinite to reveal what has always been true. And so I say to you now, let the presence live you. Let the I am act through you. Let grace be the only activity of your being. When you do this, not as a technique, but as a recognition, the personal self loses its authority, and the infinite self begins to shine through every aspect of your existence. No effort, no strain, no struggle, only the quiet knowing, I need do nothing, for the presence is doing all things through me. This is the end of personal struggle. This is the beginning of spiritual life. This is the shift from trying to allowing the essence of living as the Christ rather than as the separate self. My dear friends, now that we have touched the sacred truth that the spiritual path is not a matter of effort but of allowing, it becomes necessary to speak plainly about how this realization is lived, not merely in quiet meditation, not merely in moments of inspiration, but in the ordinary movements of the day. For the true measure of spiritual attainment is not the experience you have in silence, but the consciousness that governs you when you are cooking, cleaning, paying bills, working, speaking, relating, creating. Christ consciousness is not an escape from life. It is the light that lives your life. So let us speak of how the I am becomes practical. First, remember always that spiritual living begins with recognition that the presence is here before thought, beneath emotion, behind every appearance. Recognition that you are not the one thinking, fearing, planning, reacting. Recognition that the I am is the only identity at work. And so, when you rise in the morning, do not rush immediately into the world of the senses. Do not fling yourself into the noise of the day. Sit, even for a moment, and acknowledge, I am is the life of this day. I am is the intelligence that will guide it. I am is the presence that will unfold it. Not as affirmation, but as recognition. Not as a hope for divine help, but as the acknowledgement that the divine is already the substance of your being. Then go about your morning, but do not go as a personal self attempting to live a spiritual life. Go as one who is witnessing the presence live you. Allow the actions to arise from quietness. Notice how the breath slows, how the mind softens, how the senses open to the world without tension. This is living from the I am. Now let us speak of work for many. Imagine that spiritual consciousness belongs only to monasteries, meditation halls, or sacred gatherings. But the truth is that the presence is revealed most clearly when you are engaged in the activities of your world. When you sit at your desk, when you handle responsibilities, when you meet deadlines, when you speak with colleagues, Pause inwardly, not outwardly. Feel the subtle shift from "I must accomplish this" to "the presence is accomplishing this through me." Recognize that the intelligence required is not drawn from your mind, but from the infinite mind expressing as your mind. Joel Goldsmith taught repeatedly that the moment you believe yourself to be the source of your supply, your creativity, your success, your strength, your clarity, you fall back into separation. But when you realize that the I am is the true agent, the burden lifts and the work becomes harmonious. This is why some days feel effortless, the personal self has stepped aside, and why other days feel heavy, the personal self has taken the reins. The practice, then, is simple. Return again and again to the inner recognition of the presence, not by words, but by quiet knowing. Let us now consider relationships, for nothing tests the spiritual consciousness more quickly than human interactions. In moments of conflict, tension, misunderstanding, or emotional charge, the personal self rises swiftly. It wishes to defend itself, justify itself, assert itself. But the moment you feel this rising, pause, become still, and inwardly acknowledge, the I that lives here is the same I that lives there. There is only one self appearing as many forms. There is only one life expressing as countless individuals. There is only one being wearing the mask of another person. In that recognition, judgment dissolves, anger softens, fear evaporates, compassion arises naturally, not as a moral virtue, but as the direct perception of unity. The person before you may not know their true identity, but you do. And your recognition, your willingness to see the Christ where the world sees personality, becomes the very atmosphere that heals the relationship. This is living from the I am. Now, let us turn to finances, supply, and material needs, for many struggle in this area. When bills come, when uncertainty appears, when income fluctuates, the personal mind immediately contracts, believing itself dependent on external sources. But the mystic knows better. Supply is not in the world. Supply is not in a job. Supply is not in a person. Supply is the activity of the I am, expressing itself as infinite sufficiency. And so when faced with financial concerns, do not pray for more money. Do not beg for improved circumstances. Instead, recognize I am is the source of all that appears as supply. I am is the abundance that pours itself into visibility. The channels may change, but the source never wavers. Then act, but act from peace, not fear. Make decisions, but from clarity, not desperation. Let intuition, not anxiety, guide your steps. This is living from the I am. Finally, let us speak of moments of challenge, illness, disappointment, loss, uncertainty. These are the moments when the personal self screams the loudest, when fear tries to seize the reins of consciousness. But these are also the moments of greatest spiritual opportunity. For when you are stripped of your human certainty, you are left with the one certainty that cannot be shaken, the presence within. When the body shows symptoms, do not declare, I am sick. Recognize that the body is experiencing conditions. But you, the true, you remain untouched. When the world brings difficulty, do not declare, I am in trouble. Recognize that the condition is appearing in consciousness, but you are the consciousness in which it appears. This recognition, this silent remembrance is the beginning of freedom in every situation. And so I say again, in every moment of the day, pause and return to the truth. Do not try to reach God. Do not try to become spiritual. Recognize that God is the I that you are. When you live from that center, the outer world aligns with the inner truth. Not immediately, not dramatically, not magically, but steadily, gracefully, inevitably. This is the practical life of the Christ. This is how the I Am walks through the world. This is how Spirit expresses through you in the marketplace, the home, the workplace, the kitchen, the classroom, everywhere. My beloved friends, now that we have explored the practical ways in which the I Am moves through daily living, let us enter a still deeper truth, the truth of inner transfiguration, the sacred transformation that occurs when Christ consciousness becomes the center of your being rather than a momentary experience. For spiritual awakening is not merely a change in belief, not an improvement of personality, not the adoption of a new philosophy. It is a transfiguration, the dawning of an entirely new consciousness, a new identity, a new inner atmosphere in which the old self cannot survive. The world has long spoken of enlightenment as a sudden flash, a dramatic event, a mystical light. But the true transformation, the transformation Joel Goldsmith pointed toward, is quieter, deeper, more enduring. It is not a moment of illumination. It is the gradual dissolving of the personal identity and the revealing of the I Am as your very self. Let us look gently at how this transfiguration unfolds. At first, you experience moments of peace, brief glimpses when the mind grows quiet and the presence shines through. These moments feel spacious, luminous, soft. The world seems gentler. Circumstances seem less threatening. The heart opens naturally. But soon, the personal mind returns with its familiar chatter. What about tomorrow? What if things go wrong? What will others think? What will become of me? This oscillation is natural. The personal identity does not vanish all at once. It fades, like the moon at sunrise, gradually losing its light as a greater radiance fills the sky. This fading is the beginning of transfiguration. Then comes the second stage, when the presence becomes an undercurrent. Even when the mind is active, even when emotions stir, even when conditions challenge you, something deeper remains unmoved. It is as though an inner stillness accompanies you everywhere, not because you are trying to maintain it, but because it is becoming your natural state. You begin to feel as though life is happening through you rather than by you. Decisions arise from intuitive clarity rather than mental effort. Peace becomes less dependent on circumstances. You still feel emotions, but they pass through you without defining you. At this stage, the brain itself begins to reorganize. The patterns of fear weaken. The habits of reactivity diminish. The centers associated with compassion and intuition grow stronger. Science observes these changes with awe, but the mystic knows they are merely the outer reflection of a deeper shift. The old identity is dissolving. Then comes the third stage, when the presence becomes the governing principle of life. The personal self is no longer the center of your attention. You do not awaken each day asking, "What must I do?" Instead, you awaken with the quiet awareness. The presence is living this day. In this stage, the sense of separation fades. You feel connected to all beings without sentimentality, without effort, simply because unity is now your lived reality. You no longer seek security, for you see that nothing real can ever be threatened. You no longer cling to the past, for you know the I Am has no past. You no longer fear the future, for the I Am has no future. You live in the eternal now, not as a concept, but as a lived experience. This is the beginning of transfiguration. But there is a fourth stage, and here the sacred mystery deepens. In this stage, the presence begins to reveal itself not merely as peace, but as power. Not the power of force, not the power to control the world, but the power that Jesus demonstrated, the power of spiritual authority. This authority does not shout, it does not demand, It does not seek to bend circumstances to its will. It simply reveals the unreality of appearances. When Jesus looked upon sickness, he did not see a body in need of repair. He saw the perfection of God's presence where the world saw disease. And because his consciousness was the truth, the appearance yielded. This is the meaning of transfiguration. Your consciousness becomes the truth that dissolves illusion. You do not fix the world, you see through it. You do not heal people, you recognize their wholeness. You do not overcome problems, you discover that they never belong to the I that you are. And as this consciousness becomes stable, the body responds. The nervous system shifts permanently toward peace. The immune system strengthens. The brain's networks reorganize around harmony and coherence. Even the face changes, it softens, brightens, radiates a quiet joy. This is not imagination. It is the natural consequence of living from the truth of your being. Then comes the final stage of transfiguration, the stage Joel Goldsmith spoke of as living in the rhythm of the infinite. In this stage, you no longer feel like a person seeking God. You feel like spirit expressing as person. You are not an individual trying to be spiritual. You are the infinite expressing as individuality. There is a flow to your life now, effortless, graceful, guided. Synchronicities appear. Doors open where there were no doors. Obstacles dissolve before they reach your path. Your presence heals without trying. Your words uplift without planning. Your silence carries power. This is the life of the Christ, not as a doctrine, not as theology, not as belief, but as lived experience. This inner transfiguration is not given to the few. It is not reserved for saints, mystics, or prophets. It is the natural unfolding of the I am in every being who becomes still enough to recognize their true self. For beneath the layers of personality, story, fear, memory, emotion, conditioning, belief, beneath all of it, the Christ stands untouched, unchanging, eternal. And when this Christ, this I am, becomes your identity, your entire being is rewired to reflect that truth. This is transfiguration. This is awakening. This is the destiny of every soul. This is the birthright of all who say, not with lips but with realization, I and the Father are one. My beloved friends, we have traveled together through the inner landscape of consciousness, from the illusion of the personal self to the dawning of the infinite I, from the noise of the mind to the stillness of the presence, from the strain of human effort to the grace of divine allowing, from fear to freedom, from separation to the living realization that I am the presence that animates this life. Now, as we come to the close of this journey, which is not an ending but a beginning, let us return gently, lovingly, reverently to the one truth that has been the foundation of every step we have taken. And that truth is this: there has never been a moment when you were separate from God. There has never been a moment when the I am was not your identity. There has never been a moment when the Christ was absent from your being. The entire journey, all the seeking, the struggling, the questioning, the yearning was the dream of a self that never existed. The spiritual path is not the movement from ignorance to knowledge. It is the awakening from illusion to the truth that has always been here. The moment you recognize this, truly recognize it, something inside you exhales. A deep, ancient tension releases. A lifetime of searching softens, and you quietly realize, I have been home all along. The I am that Jesus revealed, the I am that Joel Goldsmith taught, the I am you have glimpsed in moments of stillness, this I am is not a destination. It is your origin. It is the essence out of which you are formed, the consciousness that animates you, the life that breathes you, the presence that thinks you, moves you, loves you, lives you. And so, as we conclude, let us bring the entire teaching into one silent, radiant truth. Be still and know I am. Be still and know that what you have sought is the one who is seeking. Be still and know that what you have prayed for is the one praying. Be still and know that the peace you desire is the one desiring. Be still and know that the love you seek is the one loving. Be still and know that the life you wish to trust is the one living. Everything you have longed for is contained in the I that you are, not the personal I, not the historical I, not the fearful I, not the body-bound I, not the emotional I, but the eternal, unconditioned I am the presence that existed before your story began and will remain long after every story ends. Now, as you walk back into your daily life, do not strive to remember these words. Do not cling to teachings. Do not attempt to hold spiritual ideas in your mind. Instead, allow the truth to gently sink into your being like sunlight warming the ocean. Let the memory of the personal self fade. Let the grip of fear loosen. Let the compulsion to control soften. Let the image of yourself dissolve. Let the presence take its rightful place. And as this happens naturally, effortlessly, you will discover that life becomes lighter. Your burdens are fewer. Your reactions grow softer. Your awareness becomes clearer. Your heart becomes open. Your mind becomes still. Your path becomes guided. Your days become infused with a quiet joy that needs no reason. This is the life lived from the I am. And so, my beloved friends, carry this truth with you. You are not on the path. You are the path. You are not seeking the light. You are the light. You are not striving to reach God. You are the expression of God. Let this realization be your rest. Let this realization be your strength. Let this realization be your peace. Let this realization be your freedom. And let your life simple, ordinary, sacred, become the living testament that the kingdom of God is not a place, not a future, not a reward, but the ever-present fullness of the I am. Now, quietly, gently, let us close where we began. In the presence, before thought, before emotion, before identity, be still, be aware, be present, be the I am. For this and only this has always been your home.